Yes, so we hear the why we've been concerned about the issue of sexualization for a number of years. I started working on this in 2004. And we are lucky enough that on the one hand we've been able to do a lot of research, but also because we do work with girls in the schools and community centers. We've seen in the last 10 years about 2,500 girls. Not only that we've seen them, we work for them at least for a number of, for 8 weeks. In the last 3 years, we also started developing trainings and tools for people who work with kids. So we've been doing a lot of training, about 1,500 professionals that we have trained. And also we do conferences for parents and other people who are interested. So that has allowed us to have a very interesting perspective from many angles about this issue. But I always like to start with a story. And this is the story of the Medusa. We lost the title. So in Greek mythology, the Medusa was a lovely young girl, and she was serving in the temple of the goddess Athena. And then one day, the god Poseidon falls in love with her, and he either seduces her or rapes her, according to different stories. And she gets pregnant. And then when Athena comes back, she gets really upset at the Medusa. I mean, she was taken, right? I mean, but gets upset at her. She gets upset at her. And what it does is that turns her beautiful hair into snakes and gives her the power to turn people into stone. So whomever she will look at or will look at her will be turned into stone. After this little event, the Medusa is pregnant. So why I'm using this as a comparison? Because I think that the Medusa was seduced by forces that are much more powerful than her. And in our case, we're talking about the power of the media to seduce girls into thinking that sexualization is something that is desirable and that they should pursue. She's not responsible, but she's the one who gets punished. That's always the double bind. That's not new. For women, it's like, whatever you do is going to be wrong. So, I mean, girls often, they say, well, they are pressured into dressing sexy or into behaving in a sexy way, but at the same time, they're chastised, or they are called sluts or whores and a number of other things if they do. So it's like this double bind. They can actually never win. The other interesting thing about the story of the Medusa is that she becomes alienated from others because nobody can look at her. She's all alone, right? She ends up all alone in her cave. And of course, she ends up being victimized. And if you remember the story, the hero Perseus goes into the cave. Remember, he had the shield of Athena, right? I mean, a very polished shield that Athena gave him. And so he walks backwards and using the shield as a mirror so he will not have to be exposed. He cuts her head off and takes a head, of course, because it becomes something that becomes useful for him. It's the source of power for him. So in a lot of girl studies and a lot of the research that has been done in the last few years, you see people saying, well, no, but it's like we need to look at the girls are not victims, they have a lot of agency, they're capable of doing things. It's far more complex than that. And even there's some researchers that will say, well, you know what, those girls have so much agency that we do not understand because we are old and times have changed. And when a 12-year-old, and there was a case of analyzed by some researchers of a 12 and a 13-year-old who were given oral sex to a star athlete. The analysis that these researchers provided was that, times have changed and girls show a lot of initiative. The fact that these girls did not even have a relationship with this guy, the fact that they got blamed because he was a star athlete and somebody found out and he got in trouble and he was an innocent bystander in the situation, that they were not getting anything out of it, they were not getting any pleasure, all those factors do not seem to count, right? So one of the things that we're insisting upon is that we cannot look at agency. Yes, sometimes girls, young girls, are willing participants in these events, but they're not doing it because they are really getting anything else other than acceptance, right? So that we cannot look at agency needs to be looked at in a sort of a much larger context. And in whatever context we find ourselves in, we're going to have some agency. So, you know, the Medusa, yes, of course, she probably had the chance to decorate her cave, and she had the opportunity to reorganize her serpent hair, but that doesn't mean that she had an awful lot of agency. So the agency is always limited, and so did slaves. You know, we find power in the situation. So yes, they're not complete victims. They are sometimes willing participants in these things, but at the same time, we need to look at the larger context. We need to look at the collective, because otherwise we're missing the point, right? I mean, otherwise there's no point fighting against the sexualization of children or any of the other subjects that concern us today. So going back to the idea of agency and consent, can we say that a 12-year-old is really able to consent when we know that research says that, you know, children cannot foresee the consequences of their actions, that the brain of a young person is only able to fully understand the consequences of the actions at age 26, right? Not at 12. So they are quite far from this ability. When they feel that they have no choice, and in the research that I've done with girls, what surprised me, because everybody says, well, we have to develop critical thinking, girls are really, really critical. Oh, we hate the rappers and the women, they're all naked, they're all hanging over, you know, over them, and they're just objects. From the 9 to 12-year-olds that we met in our focus groups, they all saw it. It's not that they could not see it. What they could not do is act upon it, because the pressure was so enormous from the media that this is what they're supposed to be doing, right? I mean, this is their job. This is what they need to do to adapt, right? So how free are they if there's a conditioning that becomes, and the norms of the group that become so strong? And of course, I mean, this idea that they need to belong and being accepted, and how for early teens and teenagers being part of a group is something that becomes really, really important. And of course, the last thing, if all the messages that they receive is that their true value depends on their sexuality and in their appearance, well, so how do they learn to value themselves for other things? I mean, and how much choice do they actually have if they think that that's the only value they have? So we make a distinction. A lot of people talk about hypersexualization. We think society is hypersexualized. We sell them sex through everything. That's a hypersexualization. It doesn't mean that all kids are sexualized, right? I mean, I think in English, at least in the States, people talk more about sexualization, but in Quebec or in Canada, we talk a lot about hypersexualization, which gives the impression that all kids are doing is having lots of sex, and that is not true. The impact is not on how much sex they're actually having or when they start having sex. The impact is what does all this advertising and all these concepts and pornography and all these things that we are selling to kids to their imagination when they're growing up believing that porn equals sex, when they grow up believing that their value depends on being sexy. And of course, we just saw what Disney is selling them, and of course, Disney is one of the biggest machines in selling sexualization at a very, very young age. So that is the real problem about this, is what these concepts that are being sold. And of course, sexualization is a process that is external. It's something that is provoked from the outside, whereas sexuality, because people think that they're the same thing, sexuality is something that comes from the inside. It's something that, you know, we're sexual beings from the moment that we're born, and hopefully we get to develop our sexuality as we are ready for different stages of it, which is not what is taking place. Precocious sexualization is, in general, some of the studies consider that under age 15, they do not, children and youth do not have the necessary maturity to undertake sexual relations with full knowledge of what is taking place. Healthy sexuality involves, of course, a number of things. Being ready for it, mutual respect, to be freely consenting, involves equality, intimacy that fosters deeper bonds, shared pleasure, respect for each other's rhythm, and this idea that girls are not there just to pleasure men, that this is they are active participants in their own sexuality. We use the Bronfenbrenner psychological model, saying, well, children or the individual is at the heart of the system, and then there are the different layers of influence, right, from peers to family, to the school and the community and the mass media, economic system. So depending on the concentric circles of influence. Sorry, I'm going fast because it's a lot of material. So we are seeing that in terms of the little girls, and as I said, it starts really, really early. I mentioned before when we were talking about Disney, of course there's a TV channel in the United States for babies from 6 to 2-year-olds, right? And in some of the studies they're saying that 2-year-olds already can recognize brands. And one of the biggest brands, as I said, that we're selling kids is the Disney brand. And we start with the little princesses, and we dress them as little princesses. And princesses do not really have power, right? I mean, the role of a little princess is to be pretty and to be demanding. And some researchers are talking about this idea of cultural narcissism, that how we encouraging kids to become narcissists and to be only concerned about themselves. And this is one of the machines that does that. So, and also it's teaching girls that their value again depends on being pretty and acting in a certain way. That is the little princess mentality. Of course, there's a lot of pressure, peer pressure coming from friends, trivialization of sexuality, particularly oral sex. Remember that thing about oral sex is not considered to be sex, it's something else. A lot of the people who work with kids tell us that kids do not understand what intimacy is about. If they ask them to put different sexual acts in an order of intimacy, they often will feel like kissing is more intimate than oral sex, right? So they have a distorted view of what intimacy is all about. And of course, sex is like, we were talking about food this morning, it's like, it's like junk food, right? I mean, it's something that, consumed very fast, it's meaningless, I mean, it has a lot of wrappers, we throw it out, I mean, it doesn't nourish us. It's a similar type of philosophy or ideology that is behind it. What happened to parents? Parents, I mean, what we see is that they're overwhelmed, people have more than one job, the pressures have greatly increased. Some parents want to be friends with their kids. They want to be cool, they want to be modern, so they think, oh, okay, well, we need to adapt, and this is the way things are now. They want to avoid confrontation. Parents are very much ill at ease speaking about sexuality, and not just parents. I see people who work with kids. Sex is everywhere, but it is a taboo, We do not want to address it. We get called as professionals. Well, the kids are asking many questions in our schools. Please come and talk to our kids. Come and answer their questions. People do not want to touch it. Yes. And so what is happening is that there's hiding behind certain ideas. For example, the idea of harm reduction. So we see professionals saying, we're going to just say that they need to use condoms. They do not deal with the issues that are behind it. I'll give you an example. I had a school nurse. She says, I have a 15-year-old girl who comes and she came and talked to me, and she says she's sleeping with 4 guys. And so I said, well, how did you react? And she says, Well, she seems to be happy and comfortable with that. So I just told her that she needed to use condoms. Now, I would question, is a 15-year-old really comfortable and happy in that situation? The least I could do is scratch the surface to see what's behind it. Because otherwise, why did she come to talk to the school nurse? She was not looking for condoms. She was looking for boundaries. And what I see is that people are so afraid of those questions and so upset about this phenomenon that they're unable to provide boundaries for the kids. And so they hide behind, I do my job. My job is to make sure that she knows that she needs to use a condom, and that's by doing my job. And so parents are doing the same thing. They feel ill-equipped, and they just do not deal with the situation. Some parents want to give their children what they did not have. So of course you want your little princess dress, and you want your room decorated as a little princess, and you want this, and buy everything for their kids, right? Because buying things, consumption, is a way of providing or trying to provide to respond for some needs. And maybe we're more absent than we used to be. There's all kinds of reasons. So we try to replace that with consumption. Many parents they just do not supervise their kids. I mean, many parents are just opting out of that. They feel, well, they're mature enough, and they know things that we do not know, and you know, we need to ask them to do the technological things for us. So I mean, it's just the role between the parent as an authority and the child as one who has to obey has completely changed. And part of that is advertising, right? I mean, parents, Juliet Shore says that, you know, the parents consult their kids before they buy houses and they buy cars, I mean, in major purchases. And we see a lot of advertising that is geared to, right? I mean, the kids' vans, right? I mean, there's kids and the vans, and this is my castle. I don't know if you have seen them, but I mean, it's a way we are selling to the kids, of course. It's a way of taking away power from the parents to give it to the kids, because then that allows to consume far more. And of course, the last thing for parents is that their children's youth becomes a way of preserving their own. We've seen 13, 14-year-old girls saying, well, I don't want to wear that sexy skirt, but my mom wants me to wear, you know, mom wants me to be pretty. And sometimes parents do not see it. I had one parent telling me that she was really proud of her 6-year-old because she was dancing to Britney Spears music, and she was, you know, she was really so present and so motivated with the dance, until of course she went to a party and her daughter is dancing like Britney Spears, and then she realized how she's being encouraged and how she's being looked at by a number of men that were in the room. And so at that point she realized she hadn't seen it until that point, that she was encouraging the sexualization of her daughter. In her mind that was not possible. It's until she was able to see how others were looking at her that came to her mind. So that aspect of it is that sometimes parents do not realize it. And of course, and I know many of them, excellent parents, I mean, I know parents who, you know, they don't even have television at home, that screen each and everything that their kids watches. And still, those concepts filter through. And you have 5-year-olds asking questions. It's like, where does she get it? Where does she get it that it is more important to be pretty than to be intelligent? You know, where does it come from? It doesn't come from her environment, but somehow kids do pick up those things because they are part of the culture. We talked about consumerism and how shopping gives meaning to life, right? I mean, how we have replaced a lot of the things that were motivating and providing boundaries for people by shopping, right? And then we're saying that control over one's appearance is a way of controlling something. You know, life is so difficult, life is so complex, it's so complicated that at least the control of one appearance is something that actually we can do. Pornography, of course, I was trying to update these numbers, and I did not find something more recent. This is from 2006, and I'm sure it has changed enormously because that grows. But I mean, the annual combined revenue is superior to all sports franchises, right? I mean, it's just absolutely incredible. And something that is really, really worrisome to us is the idea of the child pornography, is the growth in child pornography. And we'll come back to that. Music, of course, commercial music, rap, but I mean, rap is probably the worst, but it's not the only one. And so we are already seeing that girls feel that it's normal to be objectified, boys feel that it's normal to treat girls as objects. And some of the songs, which they listen over and over to, are already promoting unequal relationships and the objectification of women, and also trivializing violence. The study from the Kaiser Family Foundation in 2010 was saying that 8 to 18-year-olds spend on average 7 hours and 38 minutes a day with media. If you start looking at multitasking, that increases to 10 hours and 3/4, which is absolutely incredible. That doesn't count texting, which is something that they do an awful lot, or talking on the phone. The other 14,000 references, of course, it was a study that was done a while ago, and it's not, this is 0 to many, I can see. That hasn't changed. It seems we seem to continue to provide a lot of sex on TV, a lot of sex in the media, and all of it is meaningless, right? So we can see how we are continue to construct sexuality for kids through all the feeding that they get from the media. This is very interesting. I just found it this week. So we're looking at the sexualization of teenage girls, and we see that in the study that was done in Hollywood films, 40% of teenage girls compared to 6.7% of boys were shown in a very sexual way. What I find very interesting that is not there is that the films were sexualizing teenagers more than young women. So when they looked at the group of 21 to 28-year-olds, it was less. So at that age, they're allowed to have other interests or be seen in a different light, whereas teenagers are shown in very sexualized. And of course, before we saw how the progression of Disney, and it's not just Disney, the music industry in general also, I mean, artists start being in a certain way. They have a, Avril Lavigne, for example, is an example that girls often quote. They start being, she's a rebel, she dressed like a boy, she gets kicked out of school. And then what happens? I mean, she becomes sexy, and like everybody else. There's a cookie cutter effect in the music industry for all girls. Some of the studies, this is a sort of a very short compilation, and I'm not going to read it all, as I said, for the sake of experience, but they were all published by pediatrics, by how media consumption has been linked to aggressive behavior, sexualization, drug and alcohol consumption, food choices. I mean, we saw some of it. Of course, precocious sexualization, early sexualization is linked to unwanted pregnancies, a rise in sexually transmitted infections. I don't know what's happening in the States, but we know in Quebec, some of the sexually transmitted infections are epidemic, like chlamydia and others. Early sexual initiations has been also related to the use of weapons, interpersonal violence, experimentation with drug and alcohol, and so on and so forth. Oh, I'll go back to that because it's interesting, because what we see, some of the studies, is that the girls that get involved in precocious sexualization in general have very low self-esteem, whereas boys, I don't know if it's high self-esteem or high capacity for self-affirmation. So already there we're seeing a very, very different situation. So these are the stereotypes that we propose to boys. So saying, well, you know, they have to be hardcore, they're players, you know, they're obsessed by the cult of the body, sex, and cash. That masculinity is built around these practices, is built around sexual harassment. And I tell you that the 9-year-olds were telling me of being sexually harassed in school. So it starts very, very early. Okay? Violence is normal. Women they have to be seen and treated as sexual objects. For the girls, well, girls, what is a girl? You know, what is a recipe? That's one of the activities that we do sometimes with girls. What's a recipe? How do you build a girl? Well, you know, a girl needs to be sexy. She has to be very feminine. She has to be seductive, willing to satisfy men. They have to domesticate their bodies, right, in terms of diet and exercise and waxing and a lot of other practices. The body must be controlled. The needs of the body need to be ignored. The power is found in self-control and sexuality, that being a sex object is normal. And the woman is her body. I mean, that's the value. I'm going to show you a number of pictures. Because I always think, if I were somebody coming from another planet, and I will see all these pictures, what would I think of women afterwards? So that's your exercise. Codes first. Codes. Pay attention to the codes, right? I mean, one is in a cage, the other one is all very girly things, right? I mean, they're pink. And so the association, that's sort of fake innocence. Britney Spears and Aguilera. American Apparel. This morning there was somebody from Advertising Times Canada. We complain about this advertising from American Apparel. Of course, American Apparel, and if you ever paid attention, I have only 3 minutes. We complain about this, and of course what we found out is that there is no, they agreed with us, which is rare. They told us, yes, it's offensive, the girl looks young, and you know, a number of things. But there's no sanctions. They just send them a letter and tell them to remove it, and of course, last week, you know, there's something equally offensive. So we see how advertising addressed to men and to women, how different it is, right? I mean, the women have to be crooked, you know, they have to be not fully dressed. The men are always serious and doing important things, right? Another same advertising, you see the treatment of the image, right? Some of the representation of adults, you know, the adult as little girls is a way of blurring those lines. This is what girl power is about. This is Miss Bimbo is a game that exists in many languages. So girls are invited to go online to play and create their own bimbo, right? And so her job, I took it from the website, is to get a hot boyfriend. And you know, it's about shopping and boyfriends and yeah, and it's very, very popular. How to become the queen of the bimbos. Little girls, of course, I mean, I'm going to go over, Jacques, a little bit. I brought you my baby brats, right? I mean, who's is a baby, has her little bottle, but she's sexy. You can look at it. This is the Mycene Barbie. When the brats came out and they were so popular, and Mattel, who's the maker of Barbie, sued the maker of Bratz because the guy used to work for them. There's a whole story that I don't have time to tell you. So they came out with this Barbie, which is a little bit more teenager. And if you want to look at it, I'll pass it around because it's interesting what kind of things she's wearing. So you see, then you don't only have the dolls again, but you have the fashion and you have the movies and you have all the other cross-merchandising. You know, I used to say, like, I didn't want my daughters to play with Barbies when they were little, but at least Barbie had the right to be an astronaut. You know, the brats are only sexy, right? I mean, that's the only job that they have. More pictures of little girls. Those are modeling sites. This is, of course, from Toddlers and Tiaras. This is particularly interesting to see. This is a Vogue, French Vogue magazine pictures. A girl is 6 years old. And it was under the idea of gifts, the Christmas gifts, right, and fantasies. So you have all, right, I mean, look at the coast, it's a number of things. I'm going to show you the next picture and go there. So, because some of the ideas, marketing ideas, is that you need to associate young kids with brands, even luxury brands, because it will remember them and become associated. So, you know, the jewelry, also the association with being a little wild animal. And of course, I mean, yes, sure, I mean, they're trying to get brand recognition and association, but also is a way of promoting pedophilia, right? Doctors and a number of other people, actually, we do have the petition online. There was a petition against this type of advertising. So we see it as a multiple forms of violence that are involved in this type of advertising targeting children. There's a symbolic violence, I mean, there's social violence, economic violence, political violence. In our work, as I said, we mentioned a number of things, and we mentioned when we look at the questions, and of course after seeing all of those pictures, we can understand why that kids associate sexuality with porn, because this is what they see. And adults do not know how to deal with them. They're afraid to intervene. What can we do? I think that we need to believe in them, in their resilience and their capacity to resist social and peer pressure to conform. We have to dialogue with them and help them contextualize their experiences. And also particularly identifying what their own values are, right, and around sex. Teach them media literacy, we talked a lot about that today, and also understanding what society is trying to sell them, right? And of course help them improve their self-esteem, self-image, and self-affirmation. We did this guide for parents of preteens as a document that is on our website. It's a PDF document, so it can be downloaded. It's a parent, there's 7 scenarios. In this one, the girl wants to buy a sexy, said, I want to buy the top with the spaghetti straps she's trying to imagine herself wearing. So the parent starts questioning, well, you know, what do I do, you know, if I buy it? Is it appropriate? And all that kinds of doubts that parents will have. And then there are responses on how to say no and how to address those situations. This is a teacher, Luciana Bon is a teacher, an American teacher, and I thought that was very interesting comparing with the Industrial Revolution and what happens, how we lose our humanity as we become totally involved in consumption. And these are 2 of the films. We did 2 films with the National Film Board. The first one was called Sexy Inc., which is a film that we did for adults, and actually you can watch it for free on the National Film Board website.
Moi, la première des choses qui m'inquiète, c'est l'érotisation de l'enfance. Moi, je me bats contre ça depuis des années. Je considèrent qu'un string pour une fillette de 8 ans, c'est inadéquat.
C'est très problématique si on pense au nombre d'agressions sexuelles qui sont perpétrées dans notre culture. On est constamment en train de sexualiser les petites filles, si bien que parfois, cela devient presque acceptable de les voir ainsi. Regardez comment les adultes sont représentés dans les publicités ou les pages de mode. Souvent, les femmes portent de petites jupes courtes et des tresses, où elles posent en suçant un bonbon de façon suggestive et faussement innocente. Ce n'est qu'une image, bien sûr, mais quand on a travaillé comme moi, avec tant d'enfants victimes d'agressions sexuelles, il est révoltant de penser qu'on ne respecte pas cette frontière.
Petit jeu, c'est là qu'on commence à s'amuser, puis qu'on va vous demander d'aiguiser vos yeux. Vous allez toujours avoir des images, une qui vient d'une revue adolescente, une qui vient d'une revue pornographique. Laquelle est ado, laquelle est porno? Donc, A, porno ou ado? A, ado, B, porno? Laquelle?
We just came out with this film because everybody was saying, well, you know, you need to do something for kids, and so this one is for adults.
Why are girls always represented as sex objects?
Je mettrais pas ça pour aller à l'école.
Why are women always put down and men have to appear stronger? What's a stereotype? Can you count on stereotypes to know if you're good looking? Are people really that influenced by the media?
So what we did is to work with a number of kids, with a group of boys and a group of girls, for a number of months to come to these conclusions. So, and we developed a facilitation guide. So we do not sell it, it's the National Film Board that sells them, but the guide is available for free as for people to use with kids. And so far it appears to be very, very effective. So that's it. I don't have any more time, thank you.